Hey Kendrick, how's it going?
Going good. How are you doing?
I'm doing doing pretty good, hanging in there.
Good. That's good.
Awesome, great. So yeah, I guess to just kind of kick it off, I'd love for you to give us just a brief background and tell us a little bit of your experience and what got you into politics.
Sure. So hi, my name is Kendrick Jones. I am currently serving as the district representative for Senator Stephen Bradford. He is the California State Senator for the 35th District. Prior to me working for him, I did work in education. So I worked at Charles Drew University of Medicine and Science, which is where I met Abdul and all of the amazing students up there at that campus. And during the time, I was also in grad school. So I graduated with my Master's of Arts degree in education from Cal State Dominguez Hills, and I'm currently getting my doctorate in educational policy at Pepperdine University.
Oh, awesome, awesome. No, that's great. And as for like politics and how you kind of got started in that, I'd love to hear, your background as to what started, that whole journey.
Yeah, that was a whirlwind, wasn't it? So I started off while I was working in education, and while I was a student actually in undergrad at Cal State Dominguez Hills. I worked for student government. I actually was a student body vice president at Cal State Dominguez Hills. I stopped my term as VP to work for Charles Drew, and while I was at ASI, which is what we call our student government at Dominguez, I was able to actually lobby at the California State Capitol during the
Okay.
California Asian Student Summit in 2016. And during that time, I was able to connect actually with Senator Bradford in his office, as
Awesome.
well as his office, Autumn Burke's office. And eventually it just led to a lifelong partnership, if you will. And ultimately, while I was in the middle of COVID, I actually applied to the position a while ago. And in the middle of COVID, I got the call saying that they were now doing interviews. I'm like, wow, you're doing interviews in the middle of COVID. So we did the interview, and I've been on ever since. And I also served for him as the education deputy, so I still get to keep my passion for education while working with him. So that's really fun.
Oh, that's awesome. No, that's great. Yeah, no, I know I've had to interview during COVID right now too, and it's a little tricky, just being able to like not be able to meet face to face or doing video calls. It's just, definitely threw things into a whirlwind. So yeah, I know that we've been, doing a lot of posts on voting and just the importance of voting.
Mhm.
From your experience, throughout, what would you say is the most important reason to vote, and like why should people go out and vote?
Oh gosh, we have more time. The most the most important reason I would say to vote is because um, depending on whatever party you are a part of, because in my line of work, I remain apolitical. So
Yeah.
depending on what you are a part of, there's just a lot at stake. Um, I would definitely say that because of the current political climate, there's a lot of divide in
Mhm.
not just society, but also in policy.
Yeah.
So it comes to a time where when it's time to vote, it comes a time where we have to come together and actually read the policies that are being enacted, because either way it goes, it affects all of us, whether you are a Democrat or Republican. So I would say that's the most important reason to vote. Some people only look at the top layer of a policy or of a measure. There is so much that goes into developing a policy that people really should start to unlayer and look at. So that's the most important reason to vote for sure, is to just make sure that what's being presented on the ballot is actually something that you want enacted in our society. That's the most important reason to vote.
Definitely. No, yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think that it's super important to read into some of these propositions and just things that are passing. It's hard for our words to be heard if we're not voting and making those choices. So, yeah, that being said, I was doing a little bit of research and I was reading this article on Public Policy Institute of California that while California is a majority minority state, minority turnout still seems to kind of be lagging. And based off of your experience, or just in general, why would you say that that's the case?
Um, I would definitely say that it's because of the fact that historically speaking, ethnic
Mhm.
minority individuals often been put to the side,
Yeah.
and have often been made to feel as if their voice doesn't matter regardless. And
Mhm.
so when, every 4 years, when you have someone coming up saying, hey, vote, your voice matters, it kind of makes people of color feel like, well, what about the other 365 days in the year when my voice did not matter? Why is it that only now is my voice a reason for you to listen to?
Mhm.
And that solely stems from, personal gain on the politician's part. But it is a great question for people of color. Why is it that my voice is only important to you when it benefits you in regards to you getting into office? And furthermore, once you get into office, is my voice going to matter then? Because that's the most important time when my voice should actually matter, is when you're put into a position where you're able to enact change. So I feel like that is why voter turnout for minority individuals is so low, is because for years we've been made promises, and no matter how many times we go out and we vote, or we go out and we support a politician, the things that we are actually fighting for often go unheard or unacknowledged. Prime example when it comes down between Obama and Trump.
Mhm.
um, I love Obama.
Mhm.
But while Obama was, in office, I'm not saying that it was him personally, because there were definitely things that, blocked a lot of things that he wanted to get done.
Mhm.
But while he was in office, there were a lot of promises that were made. And when you look at the community similar to where Charles Drew is, there was not a lot of change that happened. And then now, fast forward, you have Donald Trump, who comes into office, who does the same thing and says he wants to, enact change. And the community just, where Charles Drew is, it still looks the same. Even on a local level, there's a lot of supervisors, for Los Angeles Board of Supervisors, and other senators and assembly people who too make those same promises. So it's not just on a national front with president; it's
Mhm.
also on a local. And I oftentimes, I just had a conversation yesterday with one of the candidates for the city of Hawthorne, excuse me, about the fact that oftentimes people prey on minorities because they feel like they know that we are a big population, but they definitely feel like if we support you, then everybody else should support you.
Yeah.
And that's always the case because we can easily support someone who can, turn around and not support us in return. So yeah, I think that that's why our turnout is so low.
Definitely. No, I agree with that 100%. I think a big point of it too is just kind of seeing that misrepresentation within politics too. And, you look at, the ballot and you're like, okay, there's nobody who represents me in there. And I
Right.
think that because of that, I've heard from family members and close friends who, won't vote because they don't even care. They're just pandering to me during this one time so that they can get more votes, or so that other people who may not want to vote, they are like, oh, you know what, they had a policy for that. So, yeah,
Mhm.
no, I think that is super important. And what would you say to like someone who doesn't want to vote to encourage someone to go in and vote? What would you say to kind of get these communities to go out and vote?
I would say that no matter how we feel, it's still our duty, and I know that I'm going to sound like real like political, but it's still our duty as Americans to fight for what is right.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I think it's really funny how we as a country can, look at another country and go like, oh my gosh, let's fix the problems that's happening over there. And it's like, did you look in your own backyard? Like America is not, we are not polished and clean, but no matter, you know, how we are here in our society, we always want to help others. And I feel like that's a characteristic that we should embody within ourselves as a country. And so because of that, and with that mindset, keeping that mindset in mind, or the mentality in mind, we should definitely continue to fight for what is right here, on our own land. Because, there's so much that's going on, and you can be either two sides of the story. You can be the person who sat back and watched the story unfold, or you could be the person who actually was involved enough to tell the story itself. So I would definitely encourage people to be on the, take the latter and to be the
Yeah.
person who is involved in the change rather than someone who sat back and watched it unfold. Um, I love my grandfather to death. He worked at Charles Drew for 31 years, and he unfortunately passed away at 17. But when we were having a conversation one time about something that happened years ago in like the 60s, he had brought up like a national event that had took place, but there were a lot of civil unrest and a lot of protests that happened, and some of them were in Los Angeles. I asked him, what did you do? Like, where were you at when all this stuff was happening? And he was like, oh, I saw it on TV, and while I was walking to school, I saw the result of it, and I'm like, well, okay, but why weren't you out there with them? And I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but it definitely was a question that came to my mind, because you're someone who's telling the story, but I think it would be a little bit more cooler if you were someone involved in the story. So I definitely encourage people to just go into voting with that mindset.
Definitely, no, I think that I agree with that. Yeah, no, that's very true. I think, standing out and having your word be heard is super important. And, not just with voting, but like in general, how would you get those policies, or how would you, want to push that change? What would you recommend to people?
I am a strong believer in opening your mouth. I think a closed mouth does not get fed. So when you are able to stand up and, voice yourself, there's so much power in a voice. People think that, it doesn't have a huge effect, but it really does. And so by being able to read up on some of the policies that are being presented, and be able to approach whatever legislator is, presenting that policy with your own recommendations. I know oftentimes a lot of legislators won't listen or they won't have the time necessarily to listen. But still, the fact that you made that first step to get them to listen, I think once that first step is taken, and if it does not go into your favor, your mentality automatically tells you, let me just keep trying. Let me take a different route. Let me go this way. Let me go up this street. Let me go around this corner. And eventually you'll start yourself getting really involved in policy reform. And ultimately, you'll start being able to present your own policies as well, and just have a legislator support you. So I feel like just by taking that first step, that's how you can definitely get involved.
No, definitely, I agree. And I think also, like, not just the power of your voice, but the strength in numbers too, as well, and getting people in your community to also come out and, have that be said. I think if you get more people, I think we've seen it here in the States, throughout the pandemic, just the more that people speak out, the more people will know. If people aren't hearing things that are going on in the world, then they won't be able to kind of make that change to what we want to get to. So
Right.
yeah, I think that's super important. To kind of switch gears a little bit, like still a little bit in relation to what we're talking about, with COVID
Mhm.
going on. We're seeing a huge effect, not just in voting in general, but just in these underserved communities with less polling places and less abilities to go out and vote during the time to vote. How have you seen that affect it, and how can we kind of combat that?
I've seen it affected, especially primarily in communities of color, very negative way. I feel that there is a system that is put in place that um, it kind of has the how can I make it sound a little bit more in touch? It kind of has the when you're in a relationship, or when you're seeking someone in a relationship and they present themselves one way and you're like, oh my gosh, they're just awesome. This is the one for me. And you spend like 2 dates with them and you're like, ugh. That's how I feel like the system that is put in place for us to vote is. It's presented in one way to where we are encouraged to go out and vote. And by us voting, it allows for us to have our place in history. However, when you look at the underlying layers of it, it's like, actually, it's not. And that is how it's presented in community of color during this election. Oftentimes, we're seeing a lot of these pamphlets that are being sent out that say, voting, vote by ballot, and the ballot box is here and the ballot location is here. They don't ever take into mind that some people in communities of color do not have cars. Some people in communities of color are not able to get to the polls due to health reasons. Some people in communities of color are not able to vote just because they don't understand the material that is actually presented on the ballot. And I personally feel that it should take a legislator or someone who's really involved in policy to be able to start having more open forums in communities of color, rather having conversations about communities of color and just thinking that people are going to jump on board. And by that taking place, I think that we will start to see a better result as it relates to people going out to vote. In regards to the pandemic itself, I feel like COVID-19 has definitely shown America's true colors, and that's me putting it very lightly. I feel like it is taking us to a place now where people are starting to take voting more seriously. However, it's unfortunately for a lot of communities of color, it's too late in the game, because there's been policies and systems put in place to now where we're actually taking it seriously. It's not accessible to us to take it seriously. I hope that makes sense. I hope I make that in a
Yeah,
good
no, I
way.
think it does. I think no, yeah, I think that, we've kind of are trying to fix something that should have been fixed like years ago, or not
Yeah.
even years, just a long time ago. And as a general, somebody who may not come into contact with that, I think we don't really know that that's an issue because we're not, seeing it day to day. So,
Mhm.
that being said, like, how would somebody, go about trying to make that change to try to change the system? Like, is there anything that we can do like that would kind of make it so that these communities are able to vote and get their voice be heard?
Yes, you can model it. I think that what America really needs right now is strong representation that is actually reflective of our mission as a country. Currently, we have a commander in chief who, that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like his actions alone have spurred a conversation inside of our country when it comes down to race relations and when it just comes down to being American people in general. And I
Definitely.
strongly feel that if we have someone in place who was actually modeling what our country stood for, that people would follow. So when it comes down to voting, we need someone who's able to model, how to get out and vote, how to get out and, help those whose voices are unheard, how to get out and advocate for communities that do not have those resources. And by you being that one person to do it, other people should fall in line as well.
I think that that's really important. And I guess one of the good outcomes of such an intense political voting situation that we have right now, I think, is people are getting more interested in politics. People want to look into how they can make that change happen. So I think if you had asked me 5 to 10 years ago what my takes on politics were, I probably wouldn't give you an answer or be very vague about it. But just with everything going on, just knowing that my word needs to be heard and that I need to be able to speak up for those that aren't being spoken about. So yeah,
Right.
no, I know one of the other things that we wanted to touch on too, to kind of switch it up a little bit, were these fake mail-in boxes. I know we talked about this offline and kind of touched on that, but definitely would love to get your take on that and just your experience kind of going through that.
Um, yeah, I think that those boxes, and I'm still a little confused as to why those legislators have not been arrested because it is tampering with a national election. So there should be something discipline-wise being put in place against them, and hopefully we see something soon. But for those who do not know, there have been fake ballot boxes placed around the state, and for a lot of people, they just know that, oh, I have to, vote by ballot. So they go to these ballot boxes thinking that it's the actual ballot box that you're supposed to go to, and it's not. The ballot box that you're supposed to go to, you could tell the difference in color. The actual ballot box is like blue and yellow or blue and gold. And then the other ballot box, uh, 5 times, ballot box that the some members of the Republican Party have put out is more gray. Um, I personally feel like it is tampering with our election, especially for communities of color. I have not seen any in communities of color. I have not heard of any communities of color, but I do know that there have been instances where some ballot boxes have been tampered with in communities of color, burned in communities of color as well. And so because of that, a lot of people in communities of color have to drive out to go and place their ballots. And in some areas where they're driving out, there have been, sightings of these fake ballot boxes. So I think that they are tampering with our election. And I also think that people should just be more well informed. So I do want to thank the media for putting out the images of the proper ballot boxes. But I still think that was not enough because there are some people who don't have TV. So you have to send out more notices to make sure that you're at least covering every single base. But those are the differences between both ballot boxes and the one that you should be putting your ballot in if you're voting.
Definitely, no, definitely. I think that that's very important. I think that if they continue to do that, then and they don't get a slap on the wrist or anything, it's like, why would they not do it again? So, so it's something that definitely when you do something bad, you have to, for the most part, face the repercussions. So, yeah. That being said, as for voting, I know we touched earlier about just the importance of voting and how sometimes some of these propositions can be super difficult. I had a proposition party with a few friends, and we kind of went over the propositions. But for a first-time voter, what would you say? I know we posted a little bit about the yes and the no's, but what a first-time voter, what should they do to learn a little bit more about these propositions and have it make a little bit more sense to the average voter?
If I was them, I would go to the author itself. There's different websites you can go to find out just a quick summary of it, but sometimes they do provide who the author of the proposition is. So I do encourage you to go to the author itself, ask those questions that you have, and if you feel just a little uneasy about the responses that you're getting, go with your gut. I mean, at the end of the day, want to oftentimes people vote, and when they vote with the mindset that their vote should match others, because they're one group or one community or one party. Still be an individual when you guys are voting. So if you do feel uneasy about what you're reading in the propositions, and if you do feel a little uneasy about what the author of the propositions is saying, then definitely filling and go someplace else, or vote another way. Jamal, is that Jamal?
Yeah, it's Jamal.
Should you still mail your ballots at this point? Yes, sir. You should still mail at this point. The election is not. We have, I think, 6 days left. So yeah, definitely
getting down to the last week.
last week. So if you have received your ballot in the mail, you should have also received a booklet that has the measures in it as well, and it has each measure of each proposition. Take the time to read that, and then from there, base your own assumption or your own perception of what it's talking about on your vote. And if you still have any questions about it, reach out to the author of that proposition.
No one had ever told me to reach out to the author or look into that. I think that is super important. I think if you reach out to the person who wrote it, they'll be able to tell you what it means and what it is. Yeah, I know there's a lot of really difficult propositions. I don't know if that's on purpose or if it's by accident, but definitely can be a little bit tricky. So I see we have another question. When is the last day to mail in the ballot?
Oh, good question. I believe that the last day mail in the ballot, if I'm not mistaken, I could have sworn that you still could have. Oh, so I said, "Wow, good to know that was another question too." That you still are able to do it on election day. I could be wrong with that, so do not quote me on that. I personally recommend that you get the sooner the better, because I do know that those boxes are ballots are being picked up frequently within those boxes. So if you can get it in before the 3rd, that would be great. But I know that either way it goes, November 3rd is still election day. So if you're not able to do the ballots by mail, then you should still be able to go to your local polling place and vote in person. And each polling has to follow COVID-19 guidelines. So if you are going to a place that you see that even the poll workers aren't wearing masks, you can, change and go someplace else. You don't have to go to the place where they're telling you to go. And you can also report the polling place as well. And you can track the ballot as well. You can. There do it online for you to track your ballot. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that they have it set up to where you're able to track it by where you dropped it off at.
Yeah, no, I think I went online the other day and I checked mine, and it was super easy. I think you just put in your information, your like your name, and then I think a couple other things, and then it tells you right away, and it gives you like a outline and lets you know where it's at. So I checked mine and everything was good to go. Yeah, I think that's very important because you know, I know with voter suppression, you know, sometimes those ballots don't get through, or you know, it's if you do, if there is an issue where maybe you sent your ballot out maybe a couple weeks ago and it still hasn't been received, is there anything that you can do or anything that you can try to get that checked, or I guess what would you do if that was an issue?
If that was an issue, I would go the extra mile. I would call the office of the California State Secretary,
Mhm.
and I'll give them a call. They're already sending out notifications as is to let everybody know to go out and vote.
Yeah.
So for the phone calls about voting should not be confusion to them. I would
Mhm.
give them a call. 9 times out of 10, we'll place you with a coordinator or with a specialist, and you will be able to provide your information. They might not take your information over the phone because there is, when it comes down to voting as well. So they might ask them directly, and you'll be able to put your information from there. They can check and see if your vote was counted in the election.
Definitely, yeah.
Go
And
ahead.
if it is lost, is there any chance for you to be able to vote again, or what would the issue be with that? Is it just, you know, you kind of forfeited your rights to vote, or how would that work?
That I don't know. I've never seen an end result of it. I've always just heard
Yeah.
like the but I don't think personally. I mean, until the Electoral College makes their final decision, that's when we have who our president is. So I think it maybe might, consider your take your vote into consideration. But I for sure if it actually will be counted at a certain point.
Definitely awesome. No, that's good to know. I think that that's important. I think, you know, for those worrying of whether the vote gets through, it's very important that, you know, all of our voices are heard. I know we're kind of rounding close to 6:30, but was there any last words that you'd like to share with with everybody watching?
Yeah, please, you guys go out and vote. Let's take it seriously. I understand that, 2020 has been a year of hell. And I understand that, there is a lot of lost hope and a lot of lost faith when it comes down to our government. But I hard to believe, but there are people actually in government who actually do care about the people. So, just think
Definitely.
about those when you guys are
Yeah.
going out and vote. They are definitely working really, really hard to make sure that there is some form of change that's being put into place. And then also, I know it's kind of cliche to say, but think about, the future generation as well.
Yeah.
There is a we already know how it is to live in the world that we are in currently. We don't want to make
Mhm.
it worse for the generations after us. So let's just try to do our part. It seems like a little part, but that you just penciling in, a little bubble that definitely changes a lot down to the way our society is. So, it may not change the way people think, but it can
Yeah,
definitely change. So let's just try to do our
definitely.
part.
No, I echo that sentiment. I think it's important for everybody to go out and vote if they haven't already. We have 6 days to be able to do it, and for those that prefer going in person, we have Tuesday to be able to go into your local polling place and go and vote. So, awesome. All right, thank you so much for taking the time, getting out of your busy day to hop on a Instagram live with us. We appreciate it. I'm sure you know a lot of people learned a lot of things. I learned a few things, so I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem at all. And if you guys have any questions, you can always just follow me on Instagram and just send me a DM and I'll respond.